Thank you for joining us this morning for the webinar. My name is Bree Houston, and I am a designer here at Qdabra Software in Forms Quo. Today we have a guest presenter, James Milne, who is going to be presenting Nintex Forms and give us a taste of what Nintex can do as far as Forms technology. So without further ado, let's see, I want to share out my screen, and I will start
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you all heard me or not. I had the broadcast not start yet, but welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bree Houston, and I am a forms designer here at Qdabra Software. And I'm happy to introduce James Milne, who is with us, giving us a taste and overview of Nintex Forms this morning. So, James, I'll go ahead and hand the presentation over to you and allow you to share out your screen.
No problem. Do I need to click something from my side to share the screen?
Oh, no, there we are. And we are going to also start recording. There we go.
Cool. So just let me know when you can see a slide deck with Nintex Forms on the front of it.
Yes, yes, we can see that.
Perfect, perfect. Cool. Thank you very much, Bree. As Bree mentioned, my name's James Milne from Myriad Technologies. I've been an MVP for about 6 years now, and I've been heavily involved in SharePoint and also Nintex workflows traditionally. So I'm pretty excited for the opportunity here today to be able to present to you guys and show you what's possible with Nintex Forms. So we'll dive into an introduction to Nintex Forms. And there's actually a whole suite of products that we need to talk about here today. So when we go through, we'll actually have a look at a quick introduction to the Nintex suite of products. We'll have a look at some of the Forms benefits that you can obtain from deploying Nintex Forms. We'll have a quick look at the actual suite of products that go together to make up a number of solutions. So we're actually looking at a number of products here. So that's probably the most important thing to get out of this presentation. So looking at the actual Nintex stack, there is actually a Nintex Forms product which we're going to be playing with this morning. I'll then dive into a mobile product. So what this means is you can actually create your forms inside SharePoint, customize them, publish them so your end users can use them, but then also use a mobile app which is available in the App Store to take your forms offline. Now, there's also another product in the stack called Nintex Live, which basically is the cloud plugin for Nintex Workflow and Nintex Mobile. So Nintex Live extends both the Forms platform and the Workflow platform into the cloud. And we'll talk about that in a bit of detail later on. There's also a Nintex Workflow product, which is what Nintex was actually originally known for. So if you're familiar with the Nintex Workflow product, being able to drag and drop and create workflows within the web browser, I'll briefly touch on that in this session just to show you where Nintex Forms fits into the stack with Nintex Workflow, but we won't spend a lot of time talking about the actual Workflow product. So Nintex Forms in a nutshell is basically a browser-based designer for customizing SharePoint list forms. Like a lot of the other Nintex products, it provides you with a drag and drop interface for customizing these forms. So you don't need any third-party tools installed on your workstation like SharePoint Designer or anything wacky like that. You can basically jump straight in through the web browser to start customizing your forms. Now another fairly powerful selling point for Nintex Forms is that it actually supports multiple devices. So if you're using iPads or tablets or smartphones, you can actually create custom versions of your forms to actually render to the given screen real estate that you'll have on those devices. And obviously, like a lot of the other Nintex products, there's a minimal code approach. It's all web-based design, web browser designer based. You can inject a little bit of JavaScript in there if you like from time to time, but I guess that's a line call, whether you call that code or not. So the Forms Designer, it's a very simple canvas. At this point, what I'll do is I'll actually switch across to my demo environment so I can start walking you through creating the form, and you'll see it's actually pretty quick and easy. So here we have a SharePoint 2013 site. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into the site contents. I'm going to add an app. Now in this example, I'm going to mock up a simple form like a leave request form, so I'm going to create it based on a custom list. So you can see my list has now been created, my leave request list. If I navigate into it, it's very simple at the moment. It just has a simple title. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this list. I might actually rename title for what reason. I'm going to use a start date. Now we're going to need some sort of choice field to give us a drop down to nominate the type of leave we are taking. And you can put whatever you like in those drop downs. So a lot of this stuff at the moment is default out of the box functionality of SharePoint. Might just give us a quick actually no, I'm fine with that. I'm happy with the fields we've got, so I'm going to stop editing the form. Now just to demonstrate, if I click on the new item, you can see we've got a very simple SharePoint form, nothing special. So this is where Nintex Forms comes in to actually help us make that form look a little bit nicer. If I click on the List tab at the top here, you'll notice there's a custom button up here that allows me to customize the item form, which is basically Nintex Forms. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Customize option, and you can see it's now thrown me into the Nintex Forms Designer. So this is actually your design canvas, and you can actually see it, Nintex Forms has actually taken that very dull, simple form that I had a second ago, and it's already started to upgrade it and make it look a little bit more visually appealing. Now, like most nice modern Office applications, you'll see it does have the nice ribbon at the top here, so I can use this to publish and preview my form, and there's a whole bunch of tools along the top here. Now, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the layouts that we have across the top here. So you'll notice I have a layout for smartphones, Nintex mobile phones, Nintex tablets, and if I pull down the other devices, you'll see there's a myriad of options here for iPhones, Androids, iPads, Windows phones, etc. So these are the layouts that I was referring to earlier, where I can easily create a layout for an iPhone. Now, what Nintex will do for me is, you can see it's actually taken a look at the layout being 320 by 500 for the iPhone, and it's automatically rejigged my form. So I can still go ahead and change things if I like. I might decide that I want to put the two dates together on the same line, and I can simply move these. It's probably not going to look too good. I might do that on the desktop form. So really what's going to happen is when somebody browses my form now, if they're using a desktop, they will see this layout. If they are using a iPhone, it will actually switch them across to the other layout. So you can see Nintex Forms actually has some smarts built into it, which will actually look at your browser and identify it through the user agent string and actually switch it to the appropriate layout to make sure that we're using the maximum screen real estate for that particular device. Okay, I'm just going to grab all of those, and I can use the keyboard to scroll them all up. So that's just a simple example of how I can actually be customizing the form in the browser. You'll now notice I actually have multiple layouts, so one for the iPhone, one for the desktop. If I decide I want an iPad or an Android version, I can just keep clicking on layouts, and you'll notice it'll keep putting in the appropriate screen dimensions for that particular device. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and simply publish this form. And it'll take a second or two while it publishes. There we go. So now if I go and go back to my site and click on Site Contents, go and have a look at the Leave Request list. And now when I click on the new item, you'll notice that looks a lot better. Now, of course, I can actually customize the banner and the colors using CSS and PNGs for the banners to make it look like my own corporate banner. But for this example, I'm quite happy with the styling that we get out of the box. Okay, so just switch back to the slide deck. So an important thing to be considering here is because Nintex Forms is actually built on top of SharePoint lists, there's a little bit of an overlap between the functionality that you find in InfoPath versus the functionality you find in Nintex Forms. So I guess the big ticket items that I want to point out is Nintex Forms enables you to create forms for mobile devices. So as you've seen there, I've automatically created iPad and iPhone renditions of my form. It's very easy to be able to toggle backwards and forwards between the designer. A big ticket item is the fact that I can push my forms out to anonymous users, and you'll see this a little bit later when I get into the live section of the demos. Users can, and with the anonymous users, that means people outside SharePoint can be filling in your forms. You'll see in a second when I jump into the mobile app, we actually have support for touch devices as well. And of course, being a browser-based designer is a big ticket item compared to the traditional InfoPath client. Now, Nintex Mobile is an app that you can download for free out of the Microsoft Store. Out of the Microsoft Store. And you can load it onto most of the popular devices like your iPhones, your Windows Phone 7 and 8, your iPads, your Android devices. Android devices will be coming shortly, but your Windows devices and your Apple devices are pretty much supported out of the box at this point in time. So at this point, what I'll do to demonstrate Nintex Mobile, if I switch back to my form, you'll notice when we actually have a look at some of these layouts that are available for us, you'll notice that there's actually a number of layouts for Nintex Mobile. Now, they're simple layouts like the iPad and the Android layouts that we've been playing with. Now, what I'm going to do is, if I just go into the start screen, you can see I've already been into the App Store and I've downloaded Nintex Mobile. I needed to type in my server name and my username, but if I switch across to Nintex Mobile, you'll notice it's a very simple application, and most users find this pretty easy to use. You've got the concept of my tasks, my forms, drafts, and an outbox. So a lot of users are very quick to learn this product because it uses a lot of similar metaphors to Outlook. Now, at this stage, you can see I already have one mobile form published, but what I'm going to do is switch back to our designer, and by me simply clicking on the layout for Nintex Mobile. Now I'll also create a layout for the snap view, because that's actually quite interesting what we can be using the snap view for. If you haven't seen that in Windows 8, it allows us to put two applications side by side. So I'll go ahead and create a snap view for my form as well. Now once again, you can see that Nintex is actually rendering and reorganizing my form. Once again, I could customize that if I like. The first thing you'll notice with the Nintex mobile forms is there's a lot of space around the controls. So we're really starting to tune your form for that touch experience where, using big fingers, you can actually be touching the fields. Now I'm just going to go ahead and publish this. Now before I publish this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at the settings, because the settings on my form, you'll notice there's a section down the bottom here for Nintex Mobile settings. Now by default, the name of your list and the description on your list will actually pass through to the mobile app, so when the users are looking at their forms, they can actually see the description. You'll notice I can, by default, that option will pass the form name and the description straight through. I'm actually going to override this because I didn't put a description on my list. So I'm going to call this the leave request form. Form description. Use this form for leave request. You can see I can put a category in here, so I'm actually going to put this in as a HR form. And if I wanted to, I could actually specify an icon as well, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and publish my form. That's taking a little bit longer than I expected. There we go. So, if I now switch back to my Nintex mobile application, now I'm just going to use the little refresh feature at the bottom here to refresh the forms. And there we go. We now have my little leave request form. If I put a custom icon in, I'd actually see it over here on the left. Use this form for leave requests. So I'm actually sitting inside a Windows 8 application here, and I can now click on that form, and you'll see not a bad rendition. I might want to actually move the date fields around, but you can see I can actually be filling in my forms inside a Windows 8 tablet. Now what's even more important about the mobile application is now that I've actually refreshed the app and I've cached a copy of this form schema, when I take the application offline, I'll actually still have the forms available to me offline. So I'll be able to fill them in even though I'm completely disconnected from the network. So I'll go ahead and create a leave request for a holiday for James. I'll leave that as a vacation, and you'll notice down the bottom here I'll use a little submit button. Now before I click the submit button, I just want to point out what's going to happen. It's going to go into my outbox, and very quickly it'll be sent to the server. But obviously if I was offline and disconnected from the internet and had no wireless access, when I submit the form, it would actually sit in my outbox until I touch the wireless network again. So you can see that's actually been sent to the server. So if I now switch across and have a look at the list of leave requests, I'm just going to cancel that so I go back to the list. And there we go. You can see straight away that's actually been sent back to the server. So I can click on it, and there's my leave request sitting on the server. Now, I guess the next thing to demonstrate is while I'm sitting in the Forms Designer, you'll notice there is actually a button over here to the right that allows me to manage my workflow settings. So you can see if I wanted to, I could actually kick into a SharePoint Designer workflow, but more importantly, you'll notice down the bottom there's create a workflow in Nintex Workflow. So if I go ahead and click on Create a Workflow, Nintex Workflow, you'll notice the Forms design is about to disappear, and it'll throw me into the Nintex Workflow Designer, where I can create a blank workflow, click on Create, and I can use the list of actions, my workflow actions down the left-hand side to start creating workflows on my leave request. So I'll just quickly configure this action just as a simple example for a workflow. I'm going to send this to James. Now this could obviously be a HR administrator or somebody like that. You'll notice I can pick people out in my organization, so let me try and find James again. There we go, there's James. I could actually use external email addresses, so these are handy for travel coordinators or partners or customers outside your organization. Or we can even look up email addresses from the properties of the item that's currently being submitted. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on OK. Leave request for, now this is where I can jump in and grab a property such as the display name for the person who initiated the workflow. So whoever's actually submitted this form, their name will be available for me as a variable, so when this email is actually sent, we'll actually see leave request for James Milne or whoever actually started the workflow. I can compose a message. And I can include links to the item. I can also notice just a few things in here which are worth mentioning. Besides the initiator, whoever started the workflow, you'll notice we also have the user's manager available from the pick list. So this will actually go off and look at Active Directory and find out who I actually report to and redirect this message off to them if I wanted to. So I'm just going to go ahead and just put in a really simple message here. And then go ahead and save that. And you'll notice the little icons now disappeared. So if I go ahead and publish this, so that's now creating the workflow. Now that's, by default, that workflow will so that's now published the workflow. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Now by default the workflow will actually start manually. So what I forgot to do is to actually start the workflow automatically when a leave request comes in. So I'll just republish that. So while my workflow is publishing, because that should just take a second, what I'm going to do is flip back to the mobile app. I can go in and fill in another leave request. So Bree's going to call in sick today. You go ahead and submit that form. You can see it's just left my outbox. Now when I switch back, I'm going to have a look at the leave request list. You'll notice that there's the traditional workflow column for my leave requests. You can see it's currently in progress for Bree's leave request. I can even go in and view the workflow history on this list, and you can see there's currently one workflow that's been completed. When I open that up, I'll actually see the executed workflow here. Okay, so I'll just switch back to the slides. So that's Nintex Mobile and also Nintex Forms Designer and Workflow in a nutshell. Nintex Live is a really interesting product. So It comes with Nintex Forms, and it also comes with Nintex Workflow. So when you actually install the products, there will actually be an extra checkbox there prompting you to install Nintex Live. If you install Nintex Live, you'll actually be able to use Nintex Live to publish anonymous forms outside your organization. Now the really special thing here is it's actually using Azure Cloud Services, so you don't have to do the traditional thing where, if you normally wanted to push a form outside your organization, you'd be talking to your IT department about the DMZ and putting servers in there and trying to get your form into the DMZ. The nice thing here is you go into Nintex Forms. So if I just pop back here and actually go into my leave request list and pop into the Nintex Forms Designer, you'll see there's actually a little button here on the ribbon for the live settings. So now that I've developed my form, if I wanted to, I can actually publish this form to Nintex Live. Now, I'll go ahead and do this because it's relatively benign. It's not really going to hurt anything on my server. You'll notice I can actually nominate users or domains. Now, this is using your social services like, I believe, Google and Hotmail accounts. You'll notice I can restrict how many submissions those anonymous users can submit. I can also use an expiry date to control how long my form is going to last for, and you can see I can also customize confirmation and cancellation messages as well. So if I've actually now allowed this to be published to Nintex Live, it's going to use a URL shortening service for me. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and now when I a bit of a warning now. Oh, okay. So I don't have complete anonymous forms set up. That has to be enabled through central admin. But the idea here is you can see I'll be able to push this out outside my organization. Okay, so there's something tricky going on with my system, but normally if this was set up right, I'd publish this, it would then pop up and show me a shortened URL that I could then email to people outside my organization. Now, another key feature for Nintex Live is it actually has a live catalog as well. So with the live catalog, if I switch back to the workflow designer, you'll notice there's a catalog icon on my toolbar. So Nintex Live not only allows me to push out anonymous forms, it also allows me to pull in additional actions for my workflows. So you'll notice down the left-hand side here, I get a number of workflow actions out of the box. I think my VM doesn't have access to the internet. But with the catalog here, I'd actually be able to pull in additional actions and have them available to me in my workflow actions on the left-hand side, and then I could simply drag and drop them over on the canvas to include cloud-based actions in my workflow. Okay, Nintex Workflow, we've already demonstrated this. That was the drag and drop workflow environment. Okay, so we've looked at some of the benefits. You can obviously use the Nintex Forms to collect and validate information. I won't go into it right now, but you can actually add validation rules to your forms. As you've seen, you can create these fairly visually appealing forms. You can also take those forms offline. And of course, because they're stored inside SharePoint, the export to Excel makes it easy to export the data out. You'll also notice how quick and easy it was for me to create and deploy those forms. So at that point, I might actually throw back to Bree and see if there's any questions from the floor.
yeah, just 1 minute and I can pull up some of those questions. It looks like we have a couple of questions. Can Nintex Forms do repeating tables is the first question.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so yes, Nintex Forms can do repeating sections. So if I just switch back to, sorry, let me just switch back to the demo environment. Inside the Forms Designer, looking down the side in the controls, here we go, repeating section. So probably not really applicable to our leave request, but if I just shunt those controls down, I can actually now grab the repeating section, drag that across, drop that on my form, and it doesn't look very exciting firstly. It just looks like a little bit of a box. But what this box now allows me to do is I can now grab other controls, like the single line text box, and you'll notice as I've dragged that across onto the panels actually change to grey. So as I drop controls onto it, what I'm really doing is adding those controls directly to the repeating section. I think that's probably enough. I'll just put a date in there. Normally we use these on things like expense claims and stuff like that. So this section is now actually a repeating section. So rather than republish my form, what I'll do is I'll just preview it. And you'll notice I can choose the layout that I want to demo or test it with. I'm just going to get it to generate the preview, and I'll be able to demonstrate how the repeating section works. Now, what's interesting with the repeating section is it's actually going to store my items against the current item in SharePoint as an XML blob. So the smart people at Nintex have actually figured out a way of actually incorporating the repeating section control into your SharePoint list forms. You'll notice the repeating section, I've added a few rows, and now I can obviously delete those rows as well. Next question.
The next question, excuse me, can Nintex Forms be used as customized workflow task forms with repeating fields?
Oh, I know it can definitely be used to customize the, oh yeah, it can be used to customize the workflow tasks, and yeah, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to add repeating fields to it.
All right. And one last question, can Nintex Forms use a people picker control reading directly from Active Directory?
Yeah, you'll notice there is a people picker control over the left here. I'll just drag and drop that onto my canvas. Now, oh, sorry, let me just put that into preview mode again, and you'll see that that's actually a people picker control like you'd find in SharePoint 2013. Obviously a few cautionary notes, so if I just type in James, there we go, it's found me, and you can see I'm obviously people picking against Active Directory. Now just a word of caution, if you then publish this to a Nintex mobile application, obviously while you're disconnected, what Nintex Mobile will do is it'll actually downgrade this field into a text field and allow you to type in James Milne while you're offline. Just while we're talking about cool controls, you'll also notice there is actually a geolocation control that I can drag and drop onto my form. So if we are running around the field with mobile devices, imagine you can actually have the users tag in their forms with the latitude and longitude of the form, which opens up some really interesting applications for being able to map your forms back into some sort of geographic location display, like a power map in Excel or some other third-party product. Sorry, next question.
All right. Is a custom Nintex form published to SharePoint as a content type?
Really good question. It actually isn't a custom content type. Sorry. when you publish, it doesn't create a content type. But when you just flip that around, it wouldn't actually stop you. You notice at the beginning of the session where I created a custom list. If I wanted to, I could have actually gone off, created my own content type, bound that content type to the list, and then used Nintex Forms to customize that.
All right. And looks like last question. Two questions. One, can you show some more logic and rules? And can you query web services within the form or only the workflow?
Okay, so first part of the question, validation and rules. You'll notice there's a rules button up here on my Forms Designer. I can go in, I can click on a particular control, and I can add rules against that control. And you'll notice there is actually a little formula builder, kind of, I was going to say similar to the one we had in InfoPath, but it's obviously nowhere near as powerful as the one we had in InfoPath. If you remember the little FX in InfoPath, it was very powerful. It's early days for Nintex Forms, but you'll notice there are some functions in here that you can use to, you can obviously reference the controls. There's a whole bunch of runtime functions that you can use in here, which aren't too bad. We can access the item properties, and there's also some other common functions that we can call. So similar to the function builder we had in InfoPath, I can be double clicking on these functions and it'll build a formula down the bottom here. And then we can use that to change the formatting of the form to hide and disable controls on the form. So what was the second part of the question, Bree?
And this can actually be combined with another question that we just got. Can you query web services within the form or only the workflow? And can you use secondary data connections?
Yes, okay, cool. Okay. So we can't, natively there's no support for web services inside of Nintex Forms. But what you can actually do is, for those people who are comfortable with JavaScript, or say a JavaScript library like SP services, when I go into the settings on the form, you'll notice I can actually embed custom JavaScript into the form. And we do have some of the jQuery selectors available to us, so we can actually use the name of the control to actually reference it through jQuery, and then you could write, if you could bring in your SP services JavaScript library, you could actually be referencing it from inside the form. So yes, you can add JavaScript to call web services. The other part of that question around can you access secondary data sources, the approach here, now I actually did pop those slides into the slide deck. So let me just see if I can find, I think I put that in the control section. Okay, so what I wanted to draw your attention to here is we can actually use your lookups, I guess is one way of looking up into another list. We do have support for managed metadata. We can also bring in workflow diagrams. Sorry, I thought I had it in the slide deck. Oh, sorry, there it is, external data. So what we do here is we leverage the BCS to make a lookup onto those other systems, and we just simply bring the external columns into the form as a BCS column, and then you can actually still customize those forms. So I guess technically Nintex isn't using those external connections. We're leveraging the BCS that's already part of SharePoint to make those external connections and bring external data in.
Great question. And probably one last question for now. In InfoPath, all the fields from the list you are working on are displayed on the left, and you can add or remove any of these to your form. How do you do this in Nintex?
Sorry, say the question again.
In InfoPath, all the fields from the list you are working on are displayed on the left, and you can add or remove any of these to your form. How do you do this in Nintex?
Oh, okay, cool. So that is actually a good question, because it took me a little while to get used to the way Nintex Forms does it. So we have a very similar concept that we had in InfoPath, where you have a control and you bind that control to a value in your schema. Now, as you saw at the beginning of the demo, I created my schema by creating a custom form. As I mentioned, I could have also created that as a content type. But the point here is we still have the relationship between a control. Notice the little link icon in the middle there. That lets me know that this control is currently bound to a field. So you'll notice up the top here it's actually connected to, and I can pull that down and I can actually select the column that that's selected to. Now the reason why I'm talking about this is because there are some overlaps with the way we did it in InfoPath. So you'll notice down the side here, some of these controls are like the controls we had in InfoPath, where if I wanted a choice, I now drag that across and drop that on the form, but you'll notice it's not connected to anything just yet. So this is a little bit different from InfoPath, because InfoPath would have automatically created that as field 1 or field 2 for me automatically. Nintex isn't the same in that respect. So by me adding this control, it's now gone, well, okay, it's disconnected, what do you want to do with it? I'd actually now have to have a text field or a choice field to bind that control to. Now, having said that, as I look down the bottom here in the controls that are available to me, you'll notice there is actually an option right down the bottom for list columns. So if I have a look at the list columns panel, what this is actually showing me, you might remember these fields from when I actually created the form. So what Nintex Forms is actually doing is it's actually looking at the schema on my list, or the content type bound to that list, and showing you the appropriate controls for each one of those fields. So this is where, if I wanted the start date at another location on my form, if I drag that across and drop that on the form, you can see that that particular control is automatically bound to that column on the custom list. So I guess that hopefully answers your question about how we drag and drop controls onto the form. There is one other really nice feature that we have in Nintex Forms, because as you can imagine, as you're switching between different layouts and customizing those forms, especially if you're hiding controls and deleting controls, you'll notice there is actually a panel I can add to the right, which actually shows me controls in use, and I can actually look at a particular layout and say, show me the controls that are being used in this particular form. And more importantly, you'll notice there is a view that allows me to say, show me the controls not in the current layout. So as you customize between the different layouts, if you accidentally forget to put a control on, you can actually see it through this particular view, and then you might realize, oh, whoops, I accidentally took the start date off the iPhone layout. Is there another question?
We're running a bit long, and there is still a few questions. Maybe we'll wrap up with one more question and then let you kind of conclude your presentation and go from there. But I think this is a good, valuable question. Can you only set formatting rules, or can you also set the values of other fields kind of through action rules? I think is what this question is talking to.
Sure. So you've got to remember, I keep coming back to the fact that we're building on top of SharePoint Designer Forms. SharePoint List Forms. So if you wanted to set a default value, what I'd be doing is going to the list settings and actually defaulting the values there. So as far as using a rule to change the default values, we actually have, and this took me a little while to get my head around when I first got introduced to Nintex Forms, we have this concept of a calculated field. So I'd add a calculated field to my form, and then I can actually use that to do calculations, and then you'll notice it also has the same concept of being able to connect that to a field. So if I wanted to default reason, and I could actually then create a formula in the calculated field to actually concatenate a bunch of values together and then push that into the reason field.
Great question. All right, James, I'll let you kind of conclude through your presentation and we'll do a little wrap-up for this morning's webinar.
No problem. So just quickly check if I've missed anything out of my slide deck. Talk about the Forms Designer. Will you be making the slides available after the presentation?
Yes, I will be. I will be sending out the slides to everyone in attendance this morning in kind of a follow-up email.
Okay,
so for anyone who's kind of interested in the content, that will be available.
Exactly. So I've included some of the other screenshots of some of the other controls and the validation rules that are available in Nintex Forms. I guess the last thing I just wanted to touch on, the last thing I'll just quickly touch on is the task panel view. So you might remember I created my leave request form. Now with Windows 8, and I'm going to have to see if I can actually do the snap screen without, here we go. So I'm just going to see if I can dock that form over to the right here. So what you'll notice is I now have Nintex Mobile docked in the task pane, and I can now actually open up another application such as a web browser. So this is where I could go to. So here in Australia we use What If for booking all of our holidays. So imagine my form that's a Nintex Mobile form docked down the side here in the task pane. I can actually be online booking my holiday and then filling my leave request out at the same time. So I guess from a business perspective, what this enables us to do is basically create forms that can actually be docked side by side next to other applications using the Windows 8 split pane mode. And we can start to create very interesting apps, I guess almost a composite app where you can be doing something in, say, an ERP system and then filling in forms on the right-hand side. So I guess that pretty much concludes my presentation, Bree. I'll throw it back to you if you like.
Great. So I am just going to display a last slide. I just want to thank James for being our presenter this morning, and thank all of our attendees as well. If you have any questions, if we didn't quite get to them in the webinar, I will be sending out kind of a follow-up email with the let's see,
slide deck.
A follow-up email with the slides, and then also if you want to reply with some questions, I can get those answered for you. And again, this is kind of a continuation of our After InfoPath series. So if you're interested in more of what we have to say of kind of the After InfoPath and different technologies available, please visit our Forms post site. We kind of give a detailed analysis, and Nintex is on there as well, with our kind of migration path. So once again, thank you all for joining us this morning, and don't forget to fill out our survey at the end of this webinar too. It kind of helps us shape and make our presentations even better for your viewing experience. So thank you and have a great Thursday.
Thanks, Bree.